to you guys there on Instagram. Hey to everyone here on my YouTube and my Couch with Christian Facebook page. Welcome. My name is Christian Jackson, your licensed mental health and wellness professional homegirl and daddy issues expert. I'm really excited to be live with you guys. I can't reach you tonight on Instagram without kind of messing up my video here on my Facebook and my YouTube channel. So I just want you to know I see you guys trickling in. This is your weekly Wellness Wednesday with CJ segment. I am your daddy issues expert. Yes, I wrote the book on how to deal with your daddy issues because I have been dealing with that for the last 15, 20 years with my father, just the emotional turmoil and trauma that comes with that. And so I wrote these two books, and just to introduce myself, I wrote these two books here. The book here, that's a manual that outlines what daddy issues are, from separation anxiety to insecurities to trust issues to stress to abandonment and rejection issues, and a workbook that goes with it so that people can have a space to really kind of process the questions and the activities that come with really working through this therapeutically. So emotional trauma is a real thing, and trust and believe we're going to get into that tonight. So I just wanted to introduce myself and who I am, what I do. I've been doing this for a consistent probably 5 weeks. And so you can check out my older videos. My son always reminds me now that I'm new to YouTube, please feel free to pause this video. If you're watching a replay, head out right now if you're watching live and go and subscribe to my YouTube channel at Couch with Christian. Welcome you guys tonight on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We got some things to get into tonight, okay? So I want to also just say that based on my books, I have a group coming up that I'm leading live. It's with me, your licensed mental health and professional wellness homegirl and daddy issues expert, because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to how to manually deal with self-care issues and insecurity issues together. And groups are so much more powerful when we get to do that. And we're seeing that today. I keep teasing what we're talking about tonight. So let me just get right into it. So I am a trauma therapist, right? It's my specialty. It's how I help people work through different things, right? I had a whole talk ready for y'all tonight to talk about grief, right? And I think in a way we probably will touch on that. I really want to talk more about what has recently come down the pipeline for a community that is very close to home, me here in Columbia, South Carolina. If you have not read the news or know what's going on here in our local community, what's happening is, the long and short of it, is that there was a white man who physically assaulted, emotionally and verbally assaulted a young black man for walking around in his own neighborhood. So the young man was walking around, not bothering anyone. The man claimed that he was harassing some white woman that was in the neighborhood. That's an age-old story. And there's a video that I will probably link below, and I'm going to give you a trigger warning because it really did touch my stuff. There's a video footage of the young man being harassed and pushed around by this soldier, and they keep calling him a soldier in the news. John P. is what I'll call him because I don't remember how to say his last name. But ever since then, he has been accosted by the police. He's been arrested, and Leon Lott took what he calls swift action, even though today is Wednesday and the incident happened on Monday afternoon. And we'll get to that as well. I really wanted to, I'm going to be candid, talk off the top of my head. I do have some notes because I can kind of ramble, and I want to make sure that I get to a couple of important points that are important for me as it relates to this subject of what happened. My mom came today, told me what happened, what she asked me, because this is very close to me. Let's just say that, right? So physically and geologically, this is not very far from where I am. And so my mom came and asked me what was going on. I don't watch the news for stuff like this. So I'm like, what's happening? What are you talking about? She was like, well, you need to make sure that you're okay and you're safe because there's something going on up the street from your house. And she took my boys to Taekwondo. I'm working, doing my thing. Things are kind of escalating and kind of getting a little heated as the day goes along. I have not seen the video. I frankly try to stay away from watching the execution videos of black men being killed on the news. That is just for my own mental health. But a friend sent it to me and I figured I would watch it. I felt led to do so. I sat here and watched this young man get, he was harassed by the white man in front of his house. It was the white guy's house, I believe. And I had an emotional reaction that I wasn't necessarily expecting, right? So I'm sitting here bawling and crying my eyes out about this whole thing. Because literally right before I watched this video, I am talking to my two sons, my husband and I, married to an amazing Black man. We are raising two Black boys in this neighborhood. They literally play in, right? And so it was really hard for me to see something that hit so close to home, because I have been trying to figure out, when talking and discussing with my friends, how do we have these conversations about racism with our children without really stamping out what their experience could be of just being themselves, right? How do we parent without fear? And that's been a conversation I've had with some friends over the years, just period, about how to be a helicopter parent. Like I write about that in my book, right? How do daddy issues impact motherhood or your ability to be a mentor? We'll look into your daddy issues. But race is a whole different thing. Culture is a whole different thing. Society treats us totally different. And there are so many questions that people have about why Black people need to have separate care and separate movements and all these things, talking about Black Lives Matter. And today, I think I want to talk about that and try to clarify some things for people who want to be allies or just don't get it. I think one of the main things we want to talk about, first of all, is trauma. I talked a little bit about this last week, about the trauma bonding piece, frankly, being that space of where we feel somehow connected to an abuser because we don't believe we need any better or can do any better. And that's something that is unfair to us, and it's something that has been passed down from one generation to the next in the Black community. So it's important for us to touch on this. Why is this important to me? Why is it that I don't even live in the same city as Trayvon Martin when it happened and he was shot all those years ago? And even last year when George Floyd was executed right in front of us, why is it that we have an emotional reaction to these things? Let me answer that for you. We are human, right? So when we see things like that hit so close to home and bring up so many things for us, that is evoking traumatic memories. What does that say to us as Black people about our self-worth? If we can see people that look like us, people that are close to us, people we're raising, people we were raised by, what does that say to us about our own self-worth? So you got to think about the messages and the scripts that are being passed down from generations that we already have being alive, right, as Black people. And then it's displayed on your timelines and in your news lines when you're on your phones and you're watching your TV and all the things. What does that say to young men like my sons who are 10 and 4 years old? What does that say to them about how society values them as people? Those of you who are watching this, a lot of you guys know me personally. You have met my boys. You know how amazing they are and how much I love them and how amazing I believe they are and how I know they're going to contribute to society in their own special way. I was brought to tears today watching that young man probably be fear for his life and try to hold his stuff together while he was harassed walking around in the neighborhood he says he lives in. So even if he doesn't live there, let's just play devil's advocate. What was it that he was doing to you, sir, to have you handle this in a violent way? What stuff have you not checked in your own way, in your trauma, and in your just minding everybody's business that had you saying that you could go out and harass this young man and put hands on him? There is a narrative happening, right, folks? It's called privilege, and I can get into that. That is a whole different soapbox and a whole different talk. But there's a reason why this white man thought he could do that to him, because he wouldn't be punished. As a matter of fact, like I said a little bit earlier, 2 days later, he was arrested. So how are we contributing to these narratives so that people believe that they are allowed to treat others in a certain way? How long are we going to sit here and act like racism doesn't matter, that discrimination is not a thing? How is it that we are going to just sit here and just be in denial? That is the first step of grief. I was going to talk about that tonight, but that's just not even looking at what the reality is. It's gaslighting, right? When somebody looks at you and says, oh, Christian, it's not a big deal. Just because that may be close to your neighborhood, that doesn't matter to you. Why are you so upset about it? Why are you crying about this thing? It's making me, in my mind, think that I'm crazy, right? That is it's a gaslighting narrative that happens in the media when it comes to us trying to woo-saw and kumbaya about this stuff. But y'all, we're not going to make real change unless we actually have a chance to have our voices heard. So tonight I kind of switched it up and I'm talking about it from the dome on my own platform, because that's what I have to do and that's how I'm contributing and continue to do so afterwards. But how is it that we are going to manage this denial? What's going to take for you to accept the fact that this is literally a problem for someone not be able to walk into their neighborhood? What is it that that young man learned about the value of who he is and his life? What if he was a young man who was already struggling with his self-worth? What if that was already a thing? And then that was reinforced by the way that he was treated in his own neighborhood. What if that happens, right? What's going to happen to that young man whose identity right now is being kept a secret? But what's going to happen to him years later when he is trying to get a job, even? Something that we think is so simple. How does he even see and view himself? Because now Baller Alert done got a hold of this story, y'all. This is a national thing. The world has seen it. What does that say what did this young man say to himself about that? For even going to get a job, for engaging in a relationship, healthy social activity, behavior. He is now probably in his head because now he is experiencing this himself. It's a reinforced narrative, something that was already there. When you actually are talking to a young Black man, what is it that he's saying about himself? What was his self-esteem even before that? What was his sense of self-worth, his value, and what he contributes to it? What if he was already being abused and traumatized? And that man just went and reinforced that entire narrative. So now we're talking about the ceiling, right? So we got to talk about poverty mentality. That is something that I talk about in a training that I'm going to plug in a little bit. But poverty mentality, that ceiling says, you know what? And I used to treat young men. I had a really great time when I first started my career talking to and treating young Black men. They would just happen to mostly be Black because of the school to prison pipeline. If you don't know what that is, it's a thing. And I can talk about that another time. But I used to treat young adolescents, Black men, who were popped for like having weed at school or whatever. So I used to lead the emotionally healthy teens group at the job that I used to have in a substance use facility. And I would literally have conversations with these young men who were coming from a certain background, who already knew, Miss Ray, that's who I was at the time. I might be dead by the time I'm 20 anyway. I was already locked up once at the MEC, which is the center for like detention right before you go behind bars. But for the kids, it was like the evaluation center, right? I've already been there once. I was 12 when I went the first time. I was 14 when I went the next. This is reinforcing a pattern that they don't even know anything different from. So what is it that we are solidifying and reinforcing in these young Black men when it comes to their self-worth? How are they going to even feel enough and valued enough to even contribute to society? What does that mean about the type of fathers they're going to be, right? So I told you I'm the daddy issues expert, sis, sir, them, they. That is me. And so I'm thinking about even the narrative that was ingrained in my own dad when it comes to his trauma story. What was he taught about value? How does that contribute to the family? So you got to think about how all these things play a role, because generational curses and generational trauma is a real thing. There is something called epigenetics, which I'm going to put up here on the screen here if you're watching on my Facebook or my YouTube. Epigenetics is the study of genetic changes that aren't necessarily caused by DNA changing, right? Which basically implies that there are other things, such as trauma, that could be a factor in switching up genetics and how our DNA is even made up, right? Really interesting work. I think you should look it up. Epigenetics is the word, and you should look at things like Black people in trauma, and you can get some information there, right? So what does this say, again, for us as Black people who are already kind of dealing with, or we are already dealing with generational trauma, and yes, slavery. I'm going to just pull that card because people like to discount that as if that doesn't matter and that racism is dead. Again, that denial piece. If we're already working uphill against that narrative, then what does that say about what we think we can accomplish, right? So that ceiling is something that we really have to try to help our young Black men break, right? We have to be able to help them see that they are worth more than and can go beyond what they believe and what they've seen. You hear people talking about breaking out the hood, and I'm the first generation college student, I'm the first generation this, or whatever it may be. That is because someone or something impacted a young man's life, a young Black man's life, to have him even try. So what is that? What is the secret ingredient to being able to help people? And if you guys, of course, want to comment, then you totally can, because I'm really wanting us to all have a seat at the table when it comes to how we can make change. I wanted to take some notes because, like I said, again, there are some things that I know that I can ramble about. I've already talked about, as a mom, what this looks like. I think parenting is already difficult. Ain't no manual to this thing, but it is different when we're talking about raising young Black men. So, and when I'm talking to my son about racism and how people may not even like you because of just you being brown, then that's a tough conversation. You should see Carter's face when he's like confused, because he's like, bro, are we all the same? And unfortunately for my son, it is not. But I was having a conversation with my friend Jessica in Vision Counseling. We were talking about the fact that it is so important for us to not parent out of fear. And that even kind of goes down to the practicability or the practicalness. What's the word? Talking about the realistic playtime and pastime that he has of just riding his bike around the neighborhood. What is it that we're going to actually do for our kids so that they feel safe? So that we are not ingraining in our kids what they can and can't do just because of the way they look. And how is that fair? So for parents who have questions who are not of the Black and brown communities and they wonder why you don't think about these things, you're wondering why Black parents are so upset, it is literally because we have a whole different manual that again is not written that we have to go by when it comes to how to raise Black kids. I think part of the narrative that some organizations in the Columbia area are trying to erase is the fact that these young Black men allegedly sexually assaulted a young white woman in the neighborhood. That's already a stain on anyone's record, right? When you throw sexual assault and just false accusations there. But what does that even say about how he even thinks he can get out of it? What does that say? So when we're talking about parenting, how is it that we are going to support the parents who are raising young Black women and young Black men, especially young Black men, because they're already villainized and already looked at as monsters, unfortunately, because of the narrative that has already been perpetuated in the society and in our timelines and in the media, right? So I think from a trauma standpoint, I've already touched on some of these things, but ain't nothing new under the sun. That's what the Bible says, right? Or at least someone said it was in the Bible. Ain't nothing new. This has been a thing, Black men being villainized for years. So it's years of work and unlearning that we have to undo. I do have some men on my caseload, and they are Black men, and I've had conversations with every one of them about why they are not allowed to be vulnerable, right? And so there are some really great pages I'll follow here. Men to Heal. I'll go ahead and tag him on my Instagram and drop some information here on Facebook and YouTube as well. There is a movement now where there are Black men, Black male therapists, Black life coaches, people who want to help Black men heal that are available, right? And so I want to bring up really quick some work that I'm doing because it's really important for us to think about where we are in our lanes. How is it that you're going to give back to your communities and really address this particular issue? And so a colleague of mine, Tina Phillips, shout out to you. Hey, sis. Hey, we have an organization called JP Training, which is literally for Jackson Phillips Training, SC. And what we've been doing for almost 2 years is a pretty famous training, if I'm going to say so. Boys in the Hood. It's a training that we do that helps people widen the lens of what culture looks like. And we are really trying to lead the charge in helping people see young Black men as humans, right? Young Black boys who are already seen as bad kids by the time they're in kindergarten and already kind of swept in the school to prison pipeline before they even leave elementary school. We're talking about those kids. So what is it that we can do for our young Black men? Do things like Tina and I are doing. We are doing professional development for other providers who are in the state or in the city. We've done some work in South Carolina, in Georgia, and in Washington State. And we have a training coming up next week. That is how we are contributing, or at least one way we are, to help people widen the lens of what trauma looks like in the Black community, why it looks so specific and different in the Black community versus the white community and other counterparts, how it's important for us, how to even have these conversations and connect with these kids, because that young man, I think, was in his early 20s, the one that was harassed here in the summit. We got to talk about how we can relate to the people who are raising him, the people in his village who may be in the system. That's where we're going. Tina and I are going to the people, the professionals who are trickling down and offering these services, from DSS to DJJ to foster care homes and all kinds of things that we've been able to get in touch with, because it's so important to make sure that we have the language and the school skills and the conversation, frankly, about what our young Black people are going through. So Boys in the Hood, we are super, super proud of what it's been able to do in our community. And things like this, I think, are important to talk about, because a lot of the times we believe that we don't have anything to contribute to the conversation. We don't think we have any kind of skill set to contribute to it, but there are certain organizations right here in Columbia and, of course, across the world that contribute to even the Black Lives Matter movement and everything locally all the way to a global effort. So I'm in my lane, and this is one way I'm giving back by doing things like our Boys in the Hood training that has birthed what we call the Waimakta. So you may have heard of the ACEs. What we do in that training is talk about how can we make a more inclusive screener for people who are in the Black and brown communities, when it comes to trauma. So even the ACEs, what we talk about is a great way for them to have opened the doors and talk about what trauma looks like. What are these traumatic experiences through our childhood that really contribute to how we see and go through life as adults, right? That's what the ACEs score does. It asks you things that you may have experienced, and you get to score to yourself. And if you have, I think, a score of like 3 and up on the ACEs, then you will likely, it's basically saying the more trauma you've experienced, the likelihood is higher that you'll die, basically. But for the Black community, there are things that we need to include in our language culturally. There are values that we hold that are just different from the white community that we need to make sure we are addressing, because we don't want our kids to fall through the cracks, right? So when it comes to my mission in mental health, and you've heard me talk about how I am a daddy issues expert. That is what I'm doing right now, as far as making sure that Black women are feeling safe facing their traumas, and they want to be able to hold space for themselves, with whether it's just one-on-one or with each other, like in the daddy issues healing circle that I can tell you about before I go. But my whole goal getting into being a therapist was making sure that Black people feel comfortable in healing, and not believing in the poverty mentality that says, hey, I'll just settle here working 5 to 8 jobs, and I'll take care of myself sometimes, because that's just how it is. You live, you work, you die. You might eat in between, you may have some fun. That's not fair. It's not just a white people thing to have therapy, right? I've been having that conversation a lot in the last couple of weeks with my clients, who have been talking about how their older aunties and grandmas are like giving them the side eye because they're in therapy with me, right? And so it's so interesting to hear all the different things that come from the older generations when it comes to self-care. This is a narrative and a perspective we have to shift, right? Because things like this, back in the day, civil rights movement, there was a lot of things that our ancestors had to get off the ground when it comes to our rights. So it was kind of like, I take the trauma, I keep it moving. Again, something else that was passed down generationally when it came from slavery all the way up to then, right? So what is it that we could do differently in this generation besides just take it, right? We understand what's happening. We speak out. We stay in our lanes. We understand what we can contribute and how. But can we take care of ourselves during that time? Yes, because we got to talk about vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma meaning I don't have to be in the same city that George Floyd was killed in to feel. I don't have to know him to feel what those people were going through, his family, his friends, right? You watch that stuff. Vicarious trauma, the emotion that came through the phone when I watched that video of the young man getting harassed Monday night, that is something that we need to take care of ourselves about, because we don't have to be directly victims of a traumatic event to feel everything that comes out of that. So how are you, my friends here watching here on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram? How are you after seeing that video? I'm going to offer a trigger warning here. It took me to a place, so I just wanted to say that before you click the screen, the link that I'm going to provide here for you guys to watch it if you choose. How are you taking care of yourself? Have you ever thought about and paced yourself enough to say, you know what, I am just going. It's what I know. It's what I was taught. It's what I watched, right? Do you take time to pause and see how that might have touched your stuff? We've talked about trauma and the strongholds that come up when we are triggered by something, right? We've talked about how that self-core narrative, those automatic negative thoughts, those ants come up whenever it's triggered by something. What may have come up for you as you were watching that video today? What was it? I've heard a lot of, in my text, I'm in some group chats with some friends, a lot of what I've been hearing is that I'm tired, I'm fed up, I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm annoyed, right? What is it that you're feeling, and what place is it taking you to? So I just want to leave you with that. It's so important to make sure that as these things happen in the media, that you don't become desensitized to it. I'm not telling you to get riled up for the sake of just getting riled up. Leaning into the emotion that comes after watching something like that or experiencing something like that collectively, white and Black people, right? When you watch something like that, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to handle it? Who are you going to connect with? Does that touch your daddy issues? Like, what is it? Maybe your father was killed in that way, in a way that was senseless, right? And that where justice wasn't served. Does that tug on your rejection or abandonment issues? What does it look like, right? And so that is going to be an important piece that you'll need to take care of when it comes to addressing your self-care, so that we can reinforce and solidify your self-worth, because this stuff brings up a lot of stuff, y'all. It brings up a lot of ugliness that we tend to ignore. But today I want to make sure that you guys are okay. and that you know that there is something you can contribute to the entire movement on a large and a smaller scale, whatever it's going to be. Like I said, Boys in the Hood has been a really good training that's been going on very regularly the last couple of years because we knew that it's been a problem. Tina and I have a really special heart for place in our heart for young Black men in the community, which is why we started that movement and why we have that training going on even now. So next week we got a talk that we're doing next week for a big, really big training. I think it's going to make a good, big difference in the field. But I just wanted to address that today. This is literally from my heart, straight off the dome. We got to talk about trauma. We got to talk about how we can take care of ourselves. One way we can do that, if we're going to talk about the Daddy Issues movement, or what I have going on here, is the Daddy Issues Healing Circle. And so if you ladies want to apply to work with me and be in space with other women who have already signed up, we have about a week and a half left for you to apply for the Daddy Issues Healing Circle. This is something that I'm really, really excited about. I know that there's going to be change when it comes to, again, getting back to that self-care piece, right? So we say that there's a ceiling and I don't have time to take care of myself, but that's not necessarily true. You make the time for what you want to make the time for. You spend the money on things you want to spend money on. I've been wearing this hair for a minute. As much as I want to buy my new bundles, I also know, first of all, my hair still looks good. But secondly, I know that I have to go to therapy next week and I got to save my coins for that. So how are you investing in yourself? What are you doing to avoid dealing with the inner work, right? So ask yourself that question. I'm inviting you ladies for the next week and a half to make an appointment with me on my calendar by going to fill out the application at the bottom of my homepage at www.couchwithchristian.com. And we can talk about how you can go and engage in ongoing self-care, because that's what the group is based on. That's what we're talking about. And of course, it serves and transfers in other areas of your life, because this is something I'm hoping that you'll be able to engage in regularly when things like the George Floyds, unfortunately, and the Trayvon Martins happen, and even this young man that is unnamed as of now happened really close to home for me today. So what are you going to do to take care of yourself? Comment below. Send me a DM. Make sure you're holding yourself accountable. I'll do the same and comment back. You can engage with me. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. I believe that's all I have for tonight. I thank y'all for sitting with me here. Let me get this off my chest. I value everything that you guys have been doing in the support of the movement for me and the Daddy Issues Healing Movement. And y'all, Black people, it's your time to heal. If you want to know how to do that, please hit me up. I can give you the resources that you'll need. If anyone wants to have any more information about the Boys in the Hood training, where we talk about really taking a really close lens at how trauma has impacted the Black community with the focus of our young Black boys, you can email me at jptrainingsc@gmail.com. I can put that in the comments below so you guys can catch it, because that has been something that's been on fire, as well as our Arrested Development training that's been popping off. We've been talking about Black trauma when it relates to young women, which has been so powerful. We've done that already, and it's got really good reception. And so I'm doing my part. How can you do yours? Do we need to get together and brainstorm how you can do your part? Let me know. Hit me up again in the DMs and continue to do so, because I enjoy hearing from you guys. You guys have a good night, and I will holler at you later. Bye. Bye, Instagram. And bye, you guys, on Facebook and YouTube.